Hey, welcome back, Happy Fabricators. Do you struggle with paralysis of analysis like I do and would like an easy template to decide the best solutions for your projects, products, or customer needs? If so, here are the 4 guidelines that I've found are the most consistent at getting the best results, and they're as simple as effectiveness, feasibility, practicality, and cost effectiveness. Let me explain in a real-world scenario. I've got a problem that needs a solution. My cargo rack that hauls my new Tudio electric dirt bikes has way too much slop in it. Now, I know what the problem is. I don't need to diagnose it. In this case, there's obviously too much slop or tolerance in the receiver in conjunction with the leverage of the load, and the result is all this wiggling, which is definitely less than desirable. So what does any good problem solver do? They come up with a bunch of solutions, write them down, and throw them at the proverbial wall to see which ones stick. But the problem is, if you're anything like me, the ones that usually stick in my head the best are cheap and easy. So the most cost-effective way that came first to my head to close up that gap and take away some of that wiggle is a simple nut and bolt combination. So I whipped out the drill, clearanced a hole on the bottom side of this hitch receiver, welded that nut up real quick. Yes, I'm welding with a battery there. Tightened her up, and the results were not necessarily effective. Sometimes cheap and easy works, but it's not always the most effective. So with effectiveness as a requirement, I went back to the drawing board to see what else stuck. And out of that came some crazy solutions. But do they apply to the next rule on the list? Feasibility. What if my solution was a force field to hold this thing up? We're just thinking big here. What if the solution was to hire a NASA scientist to engineer a magnetic field to hold this thing shut? I don't have a flux capacitor to make a force field. I don't even know if that's what you use to make a force field. Let me know down in the comments. But regardless, it's good to get those ideas out on paper just to spur creativity, but we also need to be realistic and know what is feasible. Feasibility can also be interpreted in regards to your capabilities and resources. So maybe you don't have the tooling or the skill set to make that idea feasible. It doesn't mean it's completely infeasible. Somebody else might be able to execute on it, but maybe you in the moment won't be able to make it happen. So keep that in mind. So now that I know I have to be effective and feasible, back to see what sticks. Now I got lots of solutions out of that last throw that are both effective and feasible. I could just weld my hitch to the receiver. That would be extremely effective, and it's definitely feasible. I've got a welder, but it's not necessarily practical, which is our third metric. It would definitely work, super effective, but every time I needed to use the thing, I'd have to pull out the grinder and grind my welds off so I could get my hitch receiver out of the back. Another idea I had was I could press it in with a hydraulic jack to take up that tolerance and eliminate that slop. It's effective. It would not move if it was a pressed in fit, and it's feasible. I've got a hydraulic jack, but it's also not necessarily practical. I would have to get a puller out or something like that to remove it every single time. And a product like that's just not practical. And the third solution that I came up with on this round, I've actually done before. We know the 2 causes of our problem was too much tolerance or space in the hitch receiver compounded with the leverage of the load. Now, a way to mitigate that leverage is to put a support out on the end to help support it and minimize that rocking. And I did that on another cargo carrier that I built a couple months back, and it worked pretty well. The downside to that is every time I put that on, I've got to pull out my 3/8 ratchet and put a couple extra bolts in that external support to be able to put it on and remove it. So it's not completely impractical, but it's definitely not convenient. So being practical and a certain amount of convenience is a very important thing to consider. Now at this point, I'm still trying to find out what a good solution is for that cargo carrier that meets all these criteria. So the final one's gonna help us out, and that is cost effectiveness. And cost effectiveness is a good reason to tell you about the sponsor of this video. And thanks to the sponsor of this video, we have some bikes to throw on our rack. We have here 2 bikes from Tudio. We have the Tudio Solio SO1 and we have the Tudio Arc 1. These are both great bikes. This one is for a larger person, a little heavier duty, and this is for like a 5 to 10 year old. The Tudio Solio 1 comes with hydraulic brakes from the factory, real heavy duty discs, actual pit bike tires, comfy seat, actual hydraulic suspension. So out of the box, this thing is already set up better than like a Razor is going to be, and for a price that you couldn't build a Razor for. This thing's going to top out from the factory at around 35 to 37 miles per hour and be super capable. The Tudio Arc 1 tops out at around 22 miles an hour, full aluminum constructed frame. And as a fabricator, I'm actually very impressed with the welds and build quality of this bike. Super clean welds, super good build quality, entirely aluminum frame, so this thing is super light. With the 36-volt battery, you get a ton of range out of this thing. It's got a headlight and a horn, and functioning brake lights even. You don't really see that a lot. Super easy and user-friendly with 5 speeds. This thing's a little ripper. Now let's get back to building our car rack. So if you want to see the solution that I came up with, using these 4 criteria to isolate that cargo rack's rock, keep it nice and solid, guess you're going to have to watch this build montage. Okay, so in process of making our anti-wiggle thing, this cargo rack has taken a beating over the years. I've done some rock crawling with it on the back and stuff like that. And the main beam on this thing is all bent, and the support gussets on this are all bent. As you can see, they've done some better days, so we're gonna spend a hot minute just straightening this thing out as well. Okay, so I got the stinger all welded up. I ended up putting some, I don't know what you want to call these, clad plates on just to tie in my welds because it's going to be hanging off the back of a vehicle and I just want to make sure it's strong. So this is our tensioner unit, a little piece that slides and expands in the back. And the way this is going to work, correct me, the way I anticipate this working, I hope it's going to work, is this part gets threaded into here. There'll be a washer on the back side. So once we put our pin in the hitch, we can tension this up. It's going to slide like this and expand down into the receiver, hopefully take all that slop out that we got in there. Okay, so it is finally done. You can kind of get the concept here. We'll put this thing in the hitch receiver, give it a spin, and as you spin it, this thing is going to slide and expand and hopefully take up that gap and lose our wiggle. Now, let's see if this thing works. Okay, let's see how this works. First test foot. Slides in nicely. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit this is not perfect, but I'm going to say that it served 90% of its purpose. There's very little wiggle in the rack itself. This is all my suspension wiggling. The rack to the hitch receiver is actually really isolated. Now, this 4-step process is going to be different for every person and scenario. This is just a guideline that I use to help check myself to get to the best idea that I can, or the best solution that I can. It's going to be different for you, but I feel that this is a great principle to start with to check those out. Also, for real, definitely go check out those Tudio bikes. I've had several electric bikes, and these ones are super cost effective for the performance and quality that you get out of them. It's been a great thing to do together as a family, go out in the woods or run around town and just be able to explore and get out in God's creation. So thanks again, Tudio, for sponsoring this video, and go build something.